You're listening to the Cyberwire Network, powered by N2K.
When it comes to ensuring your company has top-notch security practices, things can get complicated fast. Vanta automates compliance for SOC 2, ISO 27001, HIPAA, and more, saving you time and money. With Vanta, you can streamline security reviews by automating questionnaires and demonstrating your security posture with a customer-facing trust center. Over 7,000 global companies like Atlassian, Flow Health, and Quora use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. Our listeners can claim a special offer of $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/cyber. That's VANTA.com/cyber for $1,000 off Vanta. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CyberWire's Research Saturday. I'm Dave Bittner, and this is our weekly conversation with researchers and analysts tracking down the threats and vulnerabilities, solving some of the hard problems, and protecting ourselves in a rapidly evolving cyberspace. Thanks for joining us.
What the team have been doing is working on a generative AI platform where we can talk to and from criminals and actually work out what is happening in that scam by kind of playing the victim, playing along with the conversation, and seeing what happens next.
That's Robert Duncan, VP of Product Strategy at Netcraft. The research we're discussing today is titled Mule-as-a-Service Infrastructure Exposed.
And by extracting that kind of detailed insight over the course of conversation, you can then start to link conversations together and then identify groups. And then that's what's led to this discovery of these centralized Mule account services. So I think to kind of take a different twist on that and think about what that looks like, when you're thinking about, you're a cyber criminal, you want to eventually extract some money from the victim. The types of cybercrime we're talking about here are not nation state actors. They're typically financially motivated, and their overall goal is to extract money. There's lots of different ways to do that. So gift cards is an option, but one common option is to use money mule accounts. So these are bank accounts that are operated by third parties, so not directly by the criminal, but are kind of operated by a third party, and they may be in on the scam in the sense that they know that they're involved in a criminal activity. And in other cases, a mule might have themselves been a victim of a scam, for example, a job scam, where they've been tricked into thinking that their legitimate job involves kind of sorting payments and changing bank account destinations based on instructions they receive. So there's a variety of different types of mule that kind of fall out of that. And what we've been able to do is link those mules together in different conversations. And so, for example, being able to say, we've seen a mule account, for example, at a bank in Italy that has been used by threat actors who are based in Africa, and in a separate group by threat actors based in Spain. And the only link between those two groups is the fact that they used a single central mule account.
Well, before we dig into some of the details of all of these dots that you have been connecting, looking through the research here, I was struck by an image that you shared, which was an ad on a social media network. The image has the logos of several prominent banks, and there's text added to it that says, "Do you have a current account in one of these banks? It's easy for you to make 1,000 to 1,500 euros in 48 hours." I mean, I can see that being an attractive lure for folks who may be in a bit of a financial struggle.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of an interesting element of looking at this from two different perspectives. One is, how do these mule accounts become mules? And it's exactly this, via these advertisements on social media platforms. Another common idiom is where students are recruited. For example, when a student's leaving a country, if an international student leaving a country, they often leave behind bank accounts. And so in some cases, those may get left dormant and then are sold effectively as mule accounts that can be used when the kind of real account holder has left the country. There's quite a few different idioms for how that happens. I think what's interesting is being able to look at the types of mule accounts that you get, and then where they appear in scams can be quite different. So, for example, we can see a mule account in Italy being used in scams in Spain, and there's a fairly strong international element, certainly to the data that we've been investigating. There's lots of cross-national payments, and that helps explain why this type of fraudulent activity is quite hard to mitigate, especially when it crosses international borders.
Well, help me understand here. In the research, you mentioned using generative AI personas that you all have spun up on your own. You've created your own uh, generative AI system here. Can you walk us through how that works and how you facilitate that technology to create these dots and establish this web of connections?
Sure. So it's something that's pretty interesting and something I don't think would have been possible, say, 5 years ago. What we've been able to do is use generative AI, so tools similar to ChatGPT, in order to be able to interact with these scam messages. So the way that process works is that we start with some of our threat intelligence. So, for example, we've got access to SMS honeypots and have access to large feeds of emails, kind of bulk emails. So, in that, I guess that's a haystack of stuff that involves quite a lot of different types of activity, not all of which is scam activity. A lot of it's the kind of unsolicited email that you may be used to that doesn't necessarily lead to these conversations. But what we do is we pick out those lure messages, so the messages that we believe are the start of this type of scam, and then feed that into a generative AI solution that we've trained to have to take on the kind of personality of a victim and play along with the scam. So we're able to communicate back and forth with the criminal as this victim persona, and be able to extract intelligence about what the criminal is doing. So, for example, we can certainly look at the types of messages that we're receiving and being able to say, well, this looks like an investment scam, or this looks like pig butchering, or this looks like a romance scam. And then also extracting the kind of payment details that we've been talking about from the scam. Sometimes it's Bitcoin, sometimes it's a bank account, sometimes they're asking for gift cards. There's a really broad range of techniques that are being used to extract money out of these messages. And to kind of demonstrate the scale of this. So, for example, we can talk about some of the conversations that we've been having. Some of them are hundreds of messages long, spanning over months, where the AI is able to keep up with the criminal. So we're able to continue these conversations for a long period of time. There are other conversations that we've had where criminals will be pretty much on the hook. So they will be sending email updates every 10 minutes asking us where the payment is. Of course, we're never going to make the payment. But one of the nice things that we do, which is actually pretty interesting, is when we get sent a Mule account, one of the things that we do, which is Doesn't happen all the time. But one of the things that we do is say that the first payment didn't work and then ask for a second account. That approach has been incredibly successful in some cases where we've had 17, 18 different accounts over a 6-month period from the same threat actor. In that case, we don't necessarily believe that it was a single person typing emails to and from us, but we believe it was either a group or potentially even a generative AI system on the criminal side interacting with us. And that's why we were able to extract such a large number of different accounts from essentially from the same conversation. It's incredibly powerful, and it's obviously something that's quite difficult to ensure that you're maintaining that victim persona over a long period of time. We've been successful using specific training and specific prompts from fairly industry standard generative AI tools in order to be able to do this interaction. And it's been very powerful at changing behavior. So for example, if we see a different type of scam, for example, a romance scam, is fairly different to, say, a hi mum or hi dad scam. So the behavior of our victim also changes. We definitely have some of our AI personas who have their own name, they have their own bank account, they have their own phone number. In some cases, they've got their own girlfriends too. So we're kind of interacting with these romance scams. We've got our kind of portfolio of girlfriends that we have on the go at any one time that we're kind of stringing along, as it were, I guess, in order to kind of reach the end of the scam and figure out, what's happening, what's being used, which bank accounts are being used, which banks are they using, what Bitcoin wallets are they using.
We'll be right back. And now, a word from our sponsor, KnowBe4. It's all connected, and we're not talking conspiracy theories. When it comes to InfoSec tools, effective integrations can make or break your security stack. The same should be true for security awareness training. KnowBe4, provider of the world's largest library of security awareness training, provides a way to integrate your existing security stack tools to help you strengthen your organization's security culture. KnowBe4's Security Coach uses standard APIs to quickly and easily integrate with your existing security products from vendors like Microsoft, CrowdStrike, and Cisco, 35 vendor integrations and counting. Security Coach analyzes your security stack alerts to identify events related to any risky security behavior from your users. Use this information to set up real-time coaching campaigns targeting risky users based on those events from your network, endpoint, identity, or web security vendors. Then coach your users at the moment the risky behavior occurs, with contextual security tips delivered via Microsoft Teams, Slack, or email. Learn more at knowbe4.com/securitycoach. That's knowbe4.com/securitycoach. And we thank KnowBe4 for sponsoring our show. It's interesting to me looking through the research that there's this progression, the complexity of the webs, and there's more and more information gets connected. And one of the things I noticed was how often it is a phone number, it is an email address, and it strikes me that those things being central points in these webs, you're able to make these connections at scale. And it's fascinating to go through the research and see the progression of how things connect over time.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty interesting insight. So that's something that's definitely worth exploring in more detail. How it changes over time is also pretty interesting. So being able to say, well, this is what we saw, and this is the next time we saw the bank account. We've definitely got conversations where we've seen the same Mule bank account over a year apart. So we've seen it appear, and then in a message a year later from a different threat actor, we've seen that bank account reappear. in a different threat actor context, so on a different email address, a different phone number. And that in itself demonstrates that particular account, certainly the criminal believes that account is still live and hasn't been detected as being used in fraud. And so there's some pretty interesting insights that you can get looking at the data, even if you just look over a small period of time, being able to see what those connections look like. When we were producing some of the data for this research, the graph of, the graph of connected nodes, as it were, takes 30, 60 seconds to actually load in a web browser. So it's like a fairly meaty amount of data, even just from a relatively small section of data that we're looking at here.
And what do you see as the potential for this data to be actionable? I mean, is this a case of a bank could be able to use this, so various financial institutions to accelerate their ability to shut down these accounts? Or are those the kinds of things we're talking about?
That's right. So that's one particular use case. So certainly banks are one of the obvious users of this type of data, but certainly not exclusively. And there's also a couple of different interesting twists on how that data can be used. So one is maybe the most obvious example, which is imagine that we've been sent a bank account that belongs to a particular bank. Say it's Wells Fargo, for kind of sake of example. That in itself is a pretty interesting bit of information for that particular bank. So they know then at that point we've got a fairly strong signal that particular account is either involved in fraud already or is just about to become involved in fraud. But there's a second element, which is actually the entire network is actually interesting, because if you're a consumer and you're about to send some money, you're about to make a bank transfer, a wire transfer, you don't really want to send your money to any of the accounts that have been flagged with this flag that they've been involved. They've been marked as a destination in a scam. So there's a pretty interesting use case, which is to prevent outbound payments. So your customers, if you're a bank, don't have the ability to make payments at all to any of these bank accounts, or certainly, they're used as a flag in a risk system. The neat thing about this data is it's pretty much a binary signal. Most risk scoring is probability based. This one is quite different in the sense that we're certain that we've been sent a particular bank account or Bitcoin wallet address in connection with a scam, and we've got the transcript to prove it. And being able to say with certainty that we know this account is involved in this scam is a pretty compelling bit of data, which isn't to say that we know that the account's run by the criminal. In many cases, we know that that's not the case. And the account holder may themselves not be aware of what the account is being used for. So it's not the case to say that we've identified the criminals, but what we have done is identified bank accounts that are being used in connection with the scam.
I'm curious, whenever we're talking about generative AI and these large language models, we talk about putting guardrails on them, to protect them from doing things we don't want them to do, despite the fact that it seems like on the large part you're talking to criminals here. To what degree has that been a consideration of putting some constraints on this model that you all have constructed?
I think that's, great comment. So that's definitely something that we've thought about when doing this research. And there are many guardrails in place on our use of generative AI in this. When we're looking at this data, we've got some human review processes involved. We've got lots of automated rules as well to mitigate any risk that's involved with this. But the neat thing about how we're operating is that we're pretty convinced just from the start message that we're involved in a scam. And so future messages, we of course need to be careful about use of AI tools, but we've got plenty of safeguards in place that mitigates that risk. And then the kind of second twist on that question, which is that certainly many public generative AI models do have guardrails, and if you ask them nicely to generate a scam email, they will say no thank you, and tell you to try something else. That's also a consideration with this type of research, but it certainly isn't isn't a concern for how we as the I guess maybe it's too presumptuous to frame ourselves as the good guys, but like we're trying to detect this type of crime, and so there's definitely a case of what do we think criminals are doing with the AI as well. So I'd say there's a couple of interesting elements there.
And that's Research Saturday. Our thanks to Robert Duncan, VP of Product Strategy of Netcraft, discussing their work, Mule-as-a-Service Infrastructure Exposed. We'll have a link in the show notes. Enterprises today are using hundreds of SaaS apps. Are you reaping their productivity and innovation benefits, or are you lost in the sprawl? Enter Savvy Security. They help you surface every SaaS app, identity, and risk, so you can shine a light on shadow IT and risky identities. Savvy monitors your entire SaaS attack surface to help you efficiently eliminate toxic risk combinations and prevent attacks. So go on, get savvy about SaaS and harness the productivity benefits. Fuel innovation while closing security gaps. Visit savvy.security to learn more. We'd love to know what you think of this podcast. Your feedback ensures we deliver the insights that keep you a step ahead in the rapidly changing world of cybersecurity. If you like our show, please share a rating and review in your favorite podcast app. Please also fill out the survey in the show notes or send an email to cyberwire@n2k.com. We're privileged that N2K Cyberwire is part of the daily routine of the most influential leaders and operators in the public and private sector, from the Fortune 500 to many of the world's preeminent intelligence and law enforcement agencies. N2K makes it easy for companies to optimize your biggest investment, your people. We make you smarter about your teams while making your teams smarter. Learn how at n2k.com. This episode was produced by Liz Stokes. We're mixed by Elliot Peltzman and Trey Hester. Our executive producer is Jennifer Iben. Our executive editor is Brandon Karpf. Simone Petrella is our president. Peter Kilpie is our publisher. And I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here next time. Strata is your solution for securing on-prem and cloud apps without the hassle of refactoring. Modernize legacy systems with MFA or passwordless authentication and ensure continuous identity availability across multi-cloud environments. Say goodbye to tech debt and hello to seamless integration. Strata helps you reduce stress and gain control over your identity architecture, enhancing security and efficiency. Join industry leaders like 3M, Navy Federal, and Kroger who trust Strata for their identity needs. Visit strata.io/cyberwire to share your biggest identity challenge and receive a complimentary pair of AirPods Pro. Don't miss out. Transform your identity management today at strata.io/cyberwire. And our thanks to Strata for being a longtime friend and supporter of this podcast.